Hi everyone, this is Ted. Today's date is early Monday morning, March 23rd, a little bit past midnight. Sorry if the microphone isn't working very well. I usually have a mic, but I don't know where what the kids did with it. So they probably got to it. I can't find it anywheres. Anyways, just wanted to kind of give everybody some updates and also some follow up in terms of kind of what we discussed at the previous videos. So I did have an opportunity to reach out to several frontline providers just to get a sense of kind of what they're saying with COVID, what are kind of the symptoms that are presenting. Just because I think most of us kind of think it's going to be something similar to the flu with upper respiratory symptoms, and with the lack of testing, you want to be able to kind of gauge kind of what type of symptoms are out there, so you could have a higher index of suspicion and determine the course of action appropriately. So I reached out to some frontline providers. I was hoping to find some urgent care providers, just because these urgent care providers usually see a lot of cough, colds, so they see a lot of patterns. So when you see a lot of patterns after a while, if there's someone who comes in with a different pattern, it kind of sticks out in your mind. So I was hoping to find that. Again, haven't been able to get a lot of people who are able to see confirmed diagnoses of COVID, just because, well, we don't have a lot of tests. So there's a lot of people who kind of have some theories, but not a lot of people have a lot of definitive feedback. But for the people that I was able to talk to that have seen a lot more cases compared to those of us who haven't, it seems like everybody does have respiratory issues. Fevers are not always indicative. There's a lot of people with just low-grade fevers, not anything that's real high-grade. Seems like two things that stick out to a lot of people is GI complaints compared to flu and other common colds. There appears to be quite a few people who complain about having diarrhea, abdominal discomfort, kind of GI complaints. And then also just fatigue. It seems like this fatigue, where just excessive fatigue really sticks out. Like, man, like I couldn't even, walk up a flight of stairs. I kind of felt real tired and short of breath and just really wiped out. And those two things seems to be what sticks out in a lot of people's minds in terms of people who are frontline provider who have had confirmed diagnosed testing, so they could get actual feedback from positive cases. I also asked these frontline providers in terms of what they would like people to know, and what was something that they didn't realize, let's say a week ago, before this started ramping up. And I think, the first thing is, hey, this is a lot more serious than what most people thought. People are kind of rolling in, they're sick. It's not always old people. There's a lot of young people that are getting sick. And the other thing that kept on coming up was, hey, it's not about you. Seems to be is what someone had put terms in. It's not about you. This is about everyone. So, I think what this provider was referring to is, hey, it's like when you come in, for example, and you want to test and you're not that sick, right? You just want to test. You have these cough and cold symptoms, and you just want to know. What ends up happening is, because you want to know, providers and the hospital staff or urgent care staff, they need to go through another set of personal protective equipment just because you wanted to know. It doesn't change outcomes, right? You're still probably going to be fine. You're probably going to be about in that 80% where it resolves. But just because you want to know, we have limited testing. We just blew another set of valuable personal protective equipment, since we are all running low on that. So again, your diagnosis doesn't really necessarily change anything, and you just kind of blew people's time. You blew another test, and you also blew another set of personal protective equipment. So, hey, it's not all about you. If you're not sick, you're not having shortness of breath, don't go to your ER, don't go to your urgent care until we have more personal protective equipment and more testing. And the other thing is, I think that's what kind of people are, frontline providers are trying to get the word out. Hey, it's not all about you, just with the testing. They're also seeing a lot of people with these N95 masks. And, I don't blame anybody from going out, getting an N95 mask and whatnot, but I think there's a lot of frustration in terms of frontline healthcare providers, saying, hey, we're running low on these supplies, right? We're exposed. where the CDC is telling us to use bandanas. I mean, come on, and I think it's frustrating that it seems like, for a lot of these frontline providers is, they're seeing patients come in with, kind of, they have their N95 masks, they don't really have any sort of symptoms, and, they're like, oh, we have plenty more at home, so we'll be fine. So if you are hoarding masks, consider donating it to your hospital. Most hospitals right now have maybe a week, 2 week supply on hand. And with the explosion in cases, happening in, kind of different parts of the U.S., particularly out in New York and New York City, these personal protective equipment will run very low, very quick. So just think about that. We're all in this together, and, it's a little, I think, maybe a little bit aggressive to kind of put in those terms, but as one provider said, hey, it's not just about you. So think of it this way. This is a community issue, and we all have to do our part. I wanted to, along the same lines, I wanted to clarify the chloroquine, hydroxychloroquine, and azithromycin, the antiretrovirals I talked about in the last video. So, I should probably clarify that there are anecdotal evidence, and there are a few studies out there right now that does show that it does bring down the viral load. Whether or not that's clinically significant, it is hard to say. Chloroquine and I don't know about azithromycin, but chloroquine and hydroxychloroquine are on the protocol in China. It is on the protocol in Italy. They are all using it right now. And I will tell you this, is if it was incredibly effective, like the miracle drug that, some people say it is, guess what? Everybody would be getting better. Does it help? Probably, based on anecdotal evidence. Is it the miracle drug? Absolutely not. Now, going back to the theme of, hey, it's not all about you. When you go ahead, and even if you're able to get a doc to prescribe these, azithromycin chloroquine combination, right, for you so you can have your stash at home, again, I don't fault anybody. If you want to, you have the means, great. But kind of think of it in this case, if it does work, you're taking your stash that you probably won't end up needing or using, and you're taking away from hospitalized patients that could probably use this medication if it does work. So I want you guys to all just think about that in terms of managing resources. This is hitting the entire world, right? So it's not in this microcosm of just you and your space. It's not even within like you and your own small personal circle of your little town or city or whatnot. This is the entire world. So what happens is when you go ahead and you get your N95 masks for yourself that you may not necessarily need and will probably not make a difference, and if you go ahead and you hoard yourself a course of azithromycin and chloroquine, that's taking that medication away from a patient who is hospitalized who may need it. It's also taking away an N95 mask or frontline provider that could use it. So just go ahead and keep that in mind when you're thinking about hoarding these medications or masks just because you want to have a stash. Another way to think about it is, how do you know when to take it, right? These medications have its side effects. It is not completely side effect or risk free. There is a reason why military guys have emailed me or messaged me and saying, hey man, there's a reason why we don't use this in the military, because the side effects are bad. You get hallucinations and suicide rates goes up. For Plaquenil or hydroxychloroquine, for example, blindness is a very real side effect. Is it high? No, but it is out there. So if you go ahead and you take these medications without being monitored, without being prescribed, that potentially can get you into more problems. So certainly don't. Again, I certainly don't fault anybody if, hey, you want your own stash. I get it. But again, this is not all about you, and this is going to affect all of us. So just kind of keep that in mind when you go ahead and make your decisions. Same thing with hoarding toilet paper. You're not going to need, the supply chains are not going to get cut. You will be able to get your toilet paper or whatever you need. I still do not anticipate that being a problem. So I did want to kind of clarify the chloroquine and the hydroxychloroquine with the azithromycin. It is being used. It is being used in Italy. It has been used in China. Looks like Europe is kind of using it. It does show early on did show potentially some improvement. There are some studies that show that it does cut down the viral load. Whether or not it works remains to be seen. Whether or not it helps even just a little bit remains to be seen. But again, if it was that miracle drug, people would be getting a lot quicker in Europe as well as China, and we wouldn't be hearing about this. So it's something for the media to report, but whether or not it's clinically significant is hard to say. So again, at this point, I would not run out and get your hydroxychloroquine, chloroquine, and azithromycin. Again, you're just stressing the supply side issues. So if it does help, and it does help people who are hospitalized, it will get there will be a shortage of it. So just kind of think about that. Another question I've been getting is, people are saying, oh, the U.S. mortality is really low compared to Italy. And here's the reason why, is because we're testing, right? So people are this is early on in the curve. It takes about 7 to 10 days to land you in a hospital, and probably about, another few days if you're gonna die, kind of another week or so. So right now we're early in the course. So we have a lot of people with mild cases that have not developed into the severe and critical cases and have not died. So that is the primary reason. And again, once we start getting overrun, what's gonna happen is, hopefully we don't get to that point, but if you look at what Italy is doing, man, they're starting to ration care, and we'll talk a little bit more about that. So I wanted to kind of this is going to be the ugly truth, in terms of what is going to happen in the hospital. And, it's being reported, but it's not being reported a whole lot, okay? So I just want to kind of explain to people how this is going to play out in the hospital, and why you want to flatten the curve, and why you don't want to get sick with this and roll the dice. Even if 80% of people have mild symptoms, they do great. Remember, data right now still holds in both Europe as well as China that about 20% gets hospitalized. And let's kind of talk about what happens when you get hospitalized. This is an infectious disease, right? So it is contagious, which means that when you land yourself in the hospital, you are most likely going to be in an isolation room. If the hospital gets overrun, you will be in a big room with other COVID patients. But guess what? Nobody is coming to visit you. Your family is not going to be allowed to visit you. If you start dying, you start getting short of breath, you're going to be attended by only hospital staff. There is nobody to be there at your bedside. And I will make that really clear, and this is going to sound awful, but that is going to be the case because this is a contagious problem. So, again, this is the horror stories that we're hearing out of Italy is very much can be what happened here is you get admitted, you have to be intubated, you have to get oxygen, you need to be isolated so other people don't get it. Families are not coming to visit you, okay? And I'm going to just be really blunt, there are going to be cases out there where people are going to be dying alone. And no one wants to hear that, but there is a good possibility that is going to happen. So again, I'm here to give you guys information, not to scare you, right? But that is the reality of it, and that is why, hey, when you get a shelter-in-place order, when people say, when your your state and local officials are telling you don't go out, there is a reason for that. Like, don't go hang out with a bunch of your friends and watch Bachelor or whatever it is, going on spring break. If you get corona, you'll get corona. We've had that, people have seen that interview. Not a good idea, because when you get corona, even when you're 20, right, there is a possibility that you're going to end up in the hospital, in the ICU, on a ventilator. And it is kind of what it is. Italy is rationing their resources at this point. We are hearing reports that if you are over 60, you're not getting into the ICU and you're not getting a vent. So that kind of tells you something. And for those of you that still don't get it, who are young and healthy, and you're like, hey, I'm going to be, even if I get it, I'm going to get a vent, possibly, okay? But I just want you all to know is don't think for 1 second that, like, if you're a 20-year-old and I pull a drug screen on you and you're positive for any illegal drugs, don't think that if I have another 55-year-old that doesn't really have a lot of medical issues that come up clean, don't think that just because you're 20, you're the one that's going to get the vent. Because if I get someone who is positive for illegal drugs and someone who is clean, even if that person is older, may have some few light, kind of medical issues, guess what? Chances are I may push for that 55-year-old to get the vet versus the 20-year-old. So keep that in mind. This is probably not the time that you want to go into the hospital and get turned up positive for any illegal drugs. And again, the reason why I say that is I work out in a rural community. We get hit hard with meth, with heroin. It's a problem. But again, between someone who is clean and someone who isn't, age probably won't make that much of a difference. It's going to start going into the type of medical conditions that you have, and also potentially the type of social issues that you may also have as well. Hopefully we don't have to make that decision. Everybody is going to get the medical care that they need, but if we get overrun, and we're already starting to see evidence of this happening in New York, care will get rationed, and people need to be prepared for that. And again, another thing that potentially nobody really wants to talk about. And early on, when this was happening in China, we heard rumors about people dying at home because the hospitals were overrun and they were very full. Again, same type of thing in Italy. Now we're getting confirmation that there's people are showing up in the hospital already very sick because they know that the hospitals are overrun, and there are people who are dying at home because they can't get to the hospital, or they know that, hey, if you're 75, you're not going to get on the vents. So it is happening. So enough of that. I think you guys kind of get the point in terms of how serious this is. How long will this last? Is another question that I get, and I don't know if the media is really reporting this because I think our country is pretty reactive. I think there's a lot of people who are already thinking ahead. But hey, this is not going to be a 2-3 week kind of thing. We are looking at a minimum, I think, 2 to 3 months. And here's the reason why: is if you look at the blueprint of kind of so far, really there's only 2 countries, China and South Korea, that has managed to kind of flatten the curve and decrease their cases. They did in different ways, but I just want to kind of focus on China because China had those big numbers early, and they were able to slow this thing down. And it took them about 3 months to get out of it again. And I've said this before in my videos, with very draconian measures. Everything got shut down. I'll just give you an example of kind of what they did. For example, if you live in an apartment complex, someone tests positive in your apartment complex, everybody gets shut down. Like, nobody leaves that apartment complex. They go contact trace you, and you get tested. So contact tracing, again, means that you have epidemiologists come to your house. They ask you who you've been in contact with. Anybody with prolonged exposure or close contact will also get tested, monitored, and quarantined. So they had a very draconian response. They monitored you on the phone. If you were clean or clear to go to any stores or whatnot, you were tagged as green. Different levels of precautions will get you either yellow or red. So they tracked you, monitored you really, really closely. And this whole thing started back in December for them, and they're just starting to kind of get out of it in March, and they're going to start opening things up a little bit to see how things go. So for us, I think this shelter in place, kind of a real crackdown in movement can and will possible, if not likely, happen for 2 to 3 months. And what's going to end up happening is, as the cases start decreasing, or we're able to get more of a handle on it in terms of the numbers, and if your hospital capacity is able to handle the cases, what's going to happen is these restrictions are going to loosen, right? It's going to loosen, your cases will go up, and everything will start cranking down again. That's going to kind of go back and forth. And those are the non-pharmacological intervention. Now, are we ever going to get back to like that norm that we had 2 or 3 months ago? Yeah, it'll happen, but it's going to take some time. So what's going to end up happening is, again, non-pharmacological, which is going to be the shelter in place, closing businesses and whatnot. That's the only thing we really have right now, because we don't have medications that have been proven to really make a significant difference that's going to slow down or improve the outcomes if you do get sick with COVID. But what's going to end up happening is, as science and medicine starts developing more effective treatments, first you're probably going to get some antiretrovirals, you're going to get some medications that's going to help with the the inflammatory process. You're going to get better outcomes through these medications. So what's the first thing that's going to happen is it's probably going to shorten the hospital course, have better outcomes. So when you get this, you're not going to die, right? The chances of it's going to decrease the mortality and the morbidity of these outcomes. So it's going to improve your outcomes, and that's going to kind of have people relax a little bit to say, hey, we do have some more effective medications that's going to help with this. So then that's going to kind of start getting things back into normal. I think the restrictions are going to relax, and things are probably not going to get back to normal, kind of what we call normal, until a vaccine is going to get developed. And I'll tell you what, it doesn't matter how much you fast track, vaccination development takes a long time. Like, that is not going to happen in 6 months, right? It's going to happen minimum a year, if not more. Like, I could see it happening in a year when, like, all of the world's resources, and minds are putting everything together to try and develop a vaccine. It is possible that it might come out in a year, but I think that's probably as early as it's going to come. So I think for all of us, we want to really, start preparing for the long haul. This is not just going to be a few weeks kind of thing. When we talk about when we're going to get back to, kind of businesses opening back up and whatnot, and I think we're talking about an order of months. And if you look at China, it took them probably 3 months with very, very aggressive lockdown measures, kind of contact tracing, monitoring and whatnot. It took them about 3 months. So, hey, we're in March? Let's just say middle of March, April, May, June. We're looking into like midsummer at the very earliest, I think. And because we were already pretty far behind the 8 ball, we still don't really have a lot of restrictions. There's not really a lot of shelter-in-place orders. We're getting farther and farther behind. So I think if you look at kind of where we were at versus where China's at and kind of what they were able to do, and kind of what's going on in Italy, I don't think we're going to get a real good grasp on this until probably late summer, early fall. And hopefully we're going to be able to develop some sort of pharmacological agent that's going to improve. And again, I am not overly hopeful for chloroquine and azithromycin combination. It might help a little bit, but these are medications that people routinely will get placed on when they are in the hospital in Italy and China, and it has not really made that much of a difference, or as much of a difference as we would have liked. So that's all I have today, and I'm sorry it's kind of been, today's video was a little bit depressing, but I think we need to start planning. I think for all of us in terms of planning, like I said, like for me, man, it's, we're all kind of quarantined or kind of sheltering in place at separate locations. We're not seeing our grandparents, my parents, I'm FaceTiming them. I'm going to start kind of doing it every day, because if they get sick, it's, they're obviously the, kind of FaceTime interaction and stuff like that is the only thing that we're going to have. But I think there's a very good possibility that if any of our family members get sick, we will not be able to see them in person. And I think most likely that will be kind of what happens. So I think even though everybody is kind of separated, they have to keep their social distancing, I think now more than anything, it's really important to just stay in touch with kind of your loved ones, with your friends and family, because if they do get sick, this isn't like kind of what you think of in the hospitals in terms of being able to go and visit and whatnot. I think psychologically that's going to be really tough. It's going to be really tough for healthcare workers, and it will be very tough for patients as well as their family. So I just want to give people, be able to set their expectations in terms of what may happen, and also how long this may drag out. Okay. Again, I'll keep you guys updated as I get more information. So hopefully, again, this video is useful. If it is useful, please hit a like. It does help get the word out. Subscribing also helps, and it will give you notification in terms of when I put out a new video. And again, I'm going to try and get more people involved with these videos to, other experts in, other fields, and just to give people an idea in terms of what you have to think about in the weeks and months ahead. Because at this point, I think we're just kind of hunkering down and already getting a little stir crazy, and it hasn't really been that long. So yeah, so hopefully I'll be able to get some people to kind of talk about things to do and how to cope with this, and how to stay positive, and kind of potentially turn lemons turn lemons into lemonade. Anyways, I hope everybody is doing well, and have a good evening. Bye.